Hi everyone, today I'll be presenting a thorough summary of my main findings from my research project on the effects of Nazi propaganda on social cohesion in Germany before World War II. I will be presenting these main findings using both primary and secondary research. This presentation will cover my four main research questions for this project. My main research question was, what were the effects of Nazi propaganda on social cohesion between Jewish and non-Jewish Germans before the Second World War? I will first begin by defining propaganda and its identifying aspects in order for the rest of the presentation to be clear. Then, I will be giving the historical context for the rise of anti-Jewish sentiment inside of Germany and generally in Europe after the end of World War I. Third, I'll be going over how propaganda was used as a political tool in Germany during Hitler's regime. Lastly, I'll be going over the sociological impacts of German propaganda on social cohesion. Finally, I'll also conclude this presentation by giving a short answer to my last research question. To begin, propaganda is defined as persuasion in bad faith through willfully inaccurate communication, according to the Encyclopedia of Social Problems. They add that propaganda has a multitude of purposes and intents. Propaganda is largely based on the intent of the person which publishes it, like publishers which usually have clear aims, like strengthening nationality in times of war, or to try and create a negative bias towards a group inside another group. In most cases, however, propaganda aims to bypass the critical and logical abilities of the human brain and to create emotional reaction when viewers are faced with certain stimuli. Propaganda can provide information which ranges from being completely factually sound and well presented to information that is willfully inaccurate or unreliable. Propaganda can come in many forms and through different forms of media as well, but usually has some common characteristics, such as slogans, symbolic colors, cartoon-like images, and more. This can be observed on the picture which is on the left of this slide. This slide contains posters which were used in the primary research for this project and all demonstrate that propaganda can be aimed towards many different groups and adapted in order to serve its purpose with each one. From right to left, the first one is a movie poster. The second one is a picture of a wall with anti-Jewish inscription. A children's book image is present on the top left, and a pro-Hitler poster is on the bottom right. All of these posters and images are considered to be propaganda, but they do not all have the same informational content and do not have the same target audience. The pie chart on the right of this slide presents primary research data which demonstrates the amount of instances slogans were used in a single poster. As the presented data suggests, 55% of the posters contained at least one slogan and 18% contained at least two. This shows the very important presence of slogans in propaganda and how they effectively incite the viewer to action or to a certain opinion in a way which is easily identifiable for viewers and thus reproducible in real life. To continue, I will be talking about the rise of anti-Jewish sentiment inside of Germany and Europe in general at the end of the First World War. The war anti-Semitism first appeared in 1879 and quickly became a political movement, but did not carry as much traction. After the stock market crash of 1873, people were extremely affected, especially the middle class, and the political climate shifted. Today, the word anti-Semitism is defined as a generic term for every type of hostility towards Jews, while on the other hand, it is also a term characterizing a new pseudoscientific anti-Jewish prejudice that no longer argued religiously, but employed qualities and characteristics associated with the Jewish race. People felt extremely uneasy with the fact that Jews had been less affected by the crash and bad economic situation and started to conspire that they had more control over the world than they should have. After the end of the First World War, there was a strongly growing sense of nationalism across of Europe, which was accompanied with the desire to solve the Jewish question. The sentiment was particularly strong in losing states, like Germany. Jews were associated with Bolshevism and identified to be a part of a communist conspiracy to take over the world. Germany was in large sums of debt to America, and the population and middle class was particularly poor. They felt that they needed to find a group to blame for the loss and difficult times, and so people saw Jews, which had many private businesses, as materialist revolutionaries and felt that they were thus to blame for the war and its outcome. Inside the Weimar Republic, which came before the Nazi regime, the anti-Jewish sentiment was accentuated after there was a strong immigration from Eastern Europe, and the Jews which came from there did not fully blend into the population, leaving people feeling generally uneasy. Here are a few propaganda posters from my primary research which display Jewish people through racial and ideological stereotypes which appeared after World War I. On the left, Jewish people are described as trying to take over the world. In the middle picture, they are represented through physical characteristics, and a symbol also shows them as Bolsheviks. On the right, the children's book depicts them as evil and wanting to take over the world. Thirdly, I will be talking about the political element of Nazi propaganda and how the regime used it as a political tool. Firstly, Hitler created the Ministry of Propaganda on the 13th of March 1933, shortly after his rise to power. Having seen the Bolsheviks and Soviets effectively use methods of propaganda through culture in order to achieve political means, he felt that this is a technique that he should also use in the Nazi regime. Joseph Goebbels was appointed as the head of the Ministry of Propaganda, and the objective of this ministry was to create a national German and Aryan identity, both inside and outside of the country. Goebbels was also the director of public instruction and created programs in order to do this. 11 regional centers were opened across the country in order to provide public education, which the curriculum had been determined by the ministry. For the following months, Goebbels and his ministries made efforts to remove any traces of the presence of Jewish culture from art and popular media industries, such as film, theater, and music. Furthermore, they also made efforts to centralize and regulate these same elements, and renovated and opened many cinemas and theaters. Jewish people were forcibly pushed out of industries such as theater, where they had been extremely present before. Hitler and Goebbels also controlled the education of children and created Hitler's Youth, both of which had set curriculums used to influence children in being wary of Jewish people and strengthening their sentiment towards the German race. These images are examples of posters of the public media and images which were used in order to educate children. Fourthly, I'll be exploring the sociological effects of Nazi propaganda on social cohesion. To begin, the most important sociological tool which was used by the Nazi regime in order to dictate how non-Jewish Germans viewed Jews is the creation of an out-group and an in-group. The in-group consists of a group of people which are called to stand in solidarity of each other, and the out-group are identified as a group which is a threat to the in-group. In this sense, the Nazi identified the non-Jewish population of Germany as part of their in-group and Jewish people as part of the out-group. In societies where there is a clear definition and division of in and out groups, there is a shift in social cohesion as groups act against each other. In the situation of the out group, members are at a higher risk of persecution and discrimination from members of the in group, while simultaneously developing unity through the experiences of discrimination. In terms of the in group, When there is a strong in-group cohesion and an easily identifiable out-group, members feel less individuality and responsibility. This may lead to higher rates of violence against members of the out-group, which are largely dehumanized in these contexts. These are all trends of group behavior which were largely present inside of Nazi Germany before the Second World War. The elements of propaganda which were put out contained elements which identified members of both groups and usually worked to either cause in-group unity or fear of the out-group. The following photos were analyzed as part of the primary data and demonstrate the separation between both groups and the lack of social cohesion. The vocabulary used either strengthened in-group unity or caused fear of the out-group, and out-groups were usually discriminated against, and there were acts of violence done against them. The following graphic shows the presence of in-group unity or out-group fear inside of individual posters. This represents the fact that propaganda did both, and that Nazi Germany not only worked to create an in-group with German people, but also effectively worked to create the out-group in order for the in-group to be able to act against them. Another example of this through the primary research was the presence of inclusive and exclusive pronouns. In using these pronouns, Nazi Germany was able to clearly identify who was part of the in-group and who was part of the out-group, and how these members should act when faced with one another. So to conclude, Nazi used propaganda in order to politically and socially divide non-Jewish and Jewish Germans before the beginning of the Second World War, and capitalized off of existing anti-Jewish sentiment to do so. In hindsight, it is important to consider the fact that not all propaganda maliciously publishes false information, but that exercising caution and usually using critical reasoning when observing them enables us to escape the traps of emotion and hate, which are all driving forces towards societal violences, like the Holocaust, which occurred under the Nazi regime and as a direct consequence of the propaganda which was put out by them.